I'm Sister Helen Prejean. Maybe you know of my book, Dead Man Walking, and the film that came from it. I'm part of the Catholic Mobilizing Network, and it's a group of us Catholics that are looking to take our fellow Catholics with us on the journey to understand the death penalty and to see why it's such an integral part of the gospel of Jesus, and why as Catholics, in our pro-life stance, we oppose the death penalty, because it too is against the dignity of human life. Now, I didn't start out as a kid in a Catholic school, and in high school, I never even thought about the death penalty. The traditional teaching of the church had been that people who do really bad crimes and are very violent, that society has a right to defend society against them. So Thomas Aquinas had written in the 12th century that, you know, when you have a violent offender among you, that it's self-defense for the society. It's just like if you had a diseased arm, you could cut it off for the health of the body of the whole. And so the state could execute violent criminals. And so I grew up with that, and I never questioned it, of course. But then we grow in our faith. We never stay the same. You look at a flower, look at a tree, look at anything growing. And faith is like that too. And that happened to me. Our sisters, the Sisters of St. Joseph, made a decision in the early 80s to be on the side of poor people. And it's when I got involved in the lives of struggling African American people in the St. Thomas housing projects in New Orleans that the whole arena of social justice opened up for me. And in that, I wrote a man on death row. His name was Patrick Sonnier. And that's the first story in this book, Dead Man Walking. And through this experience of being with this man on death row, and 2.5 years later, accompanying him to execution, and then meeting the murder victims' families. 2 families had had their teenage son and daughter murdered by this man that I was visiting on death row. The whole mystery opened up to me, and I got exposed to the pain and the suffering on both sides. As Catholics, we believe in pro-life. We're for the dignity of all life. And I learned that as a child. I learned it. It was strong in me that, of course, an unborn child, who's the most innocent and vulnerable of all, this is just a little being struggling to be born, has a right to life and should be respected. And the mother making that decision about life and death needs to be protected, needs to be supported so that she'll choose life. But when it comes to the death penalty, here's somebody who's not innocent and has stepped across a chasm and sometimes brutally and heinously killed in cold blood an innocent human being and plunged families into pain that's just indescribable. Well, are we going to say that they have a dignity too, like an unborn child, or like people with Alzheimer's, and that they shouldn't have their lives snuffed out by some kind of 3 doctors deciding that it's time for them to be snuffed out of life? Are we going to put these two on the same footing? And we're talking about a few guilty criminals on death row over against millions of babies, unborn babies that need to be protected? How can we can't put them on an equal basis. And for a long time, what I thought, and basically what our teaching was, that innocent life has an inviolable dignity that must never be taken. But guilty life, when people are found guilty and they've done the crime, well, they deserve the punishment. They took life, so we have a right to take their life. And I get plunged into that and have to reflect on it deeply, because now I know a man. I know a man on death row. The movie of Dead Man Walking brings you over into this mystery on both sides of this. The film isn't a polemic and arguments against the death penalty. It just brings you into it. Look at the suffering here. Look what this person did. And when we know they're guilty, now if there's a question of innocence, okay, but when we know they're guilty, doesn't justice demand that we take their life as well? What happened then is, in this process of knowing people, knowing the man on death row and accompanying him to execution in the electric chair in Louisiana, and I saw his dignity. Not that he was innocent, not that he was a hero. He had participated in brutally killing 2 innocent young people. But when he says to me, as he's walking to the electric chair, and he's shackled, he had a belt around his waist, handcuffed to the belt, he has leg irons on his legs, he's surrounded by guards, and they're bringing him across the room where they're going to strap him down in a chair and kill him with 1,900 volts of electricity. He says to me, "Sister, just pray that God holds up my legs as I make that walk." And I'm thinking, I'm there. And I say, he's been rendered completely defenseless, and now he's going to be taken out and he's going to be killed. And in the dialogue that was going on everywhere, the Catholic bishops were raising their voices more and more about the death penalty, that there was an issue of dignity here. They were raising their voices more and more about what does it mean now for our society when someone has killed, that the answer to that is to kill them. Are we like saying violence is a way to redeem society, and when people have done some things that are so out of the pale and so bad that it's okay to kill them? Are we like sanctioning violence, and the bishops are raising their voices, and I'm thinking about it too, and beginning to raise my voice about it? And I came to this profound understanding, and it's the gospel of Jesus, very clear, that all life is sacred, and this man too has a dignity, not to be tortured and not to be killed, that's just basic, and that's part of the gospel of Jesus. Jesus on the cross turned to the criminal hanging there beside him and said, "This day you'll be with me in paradise." Jesus had the instinct and was always in the company of other people who were despised and not considered human or holy like the rest of us. And I got it in the person of this man. What's great about being a Catholic is that we are pro-life across the board. So dignity of innocent life, yes, all human beings from birth to death have a dignity. God gives life. Who are we to take life? And the more I learned about how the criminal justice system works and all the mistakes and the prejudices that are in there about choosing who's going to die and who doesn't, the more I knew that we have to leave it up to God, who gives life, to be the one to decide who takes life. Do we have a right and a need to protect ourselves as a society? Yes. And that's what prisons are for. And Pope John Paul, in his encyclical, The Gospel of Life, said the first purpose of prisons is not to punish or cause pain, but to restore life. So prisons are a way in which we can protect ourselves as a society without imitating the violence of people who kill and say the only way we can be safe is if we kill them. The dignity of human life is integral to the gospel of Jesus. It's integral to our life as Catholics. And so we're pro-life across the board, innocent and guilty.